Okay guys, so today we are going to start painting and we are going to learn how to make our flesh tones for our caricatures because that's going to be the most important part to get absolutely right so we don't look too yellow, too brown, too orange, etc. A couple things you're going to need today as I get set up. So my watercolors are a little dirty. They've been used before and that happens. That's fine. I believe your kit is pretty new and fresh, but in case you were playing around with them and they're a little dirty, you will need a damp paper towel. Okay, I'm also going to use a little bit of masking tape, but if you have washi tape or any sort of tape in the house, it really will work okay. I would avoid Scotch tape, clear tape as much as you can, but any sort of masking tape will be okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to use that damp paper towel, and I am going to wipe out all of my lid section of my palette. And you're going to want to do this anytime you work in watercolors, anytime you restart something, because you don't want any of that pigment left over when you go to mix colors. Because watercolors, a little pigment goes a really long way. That's why the watercolor palette is, they're so small, because that color can last a really long time. So if you don't get it super clean, then the little tiny drop of blue might get into your orange or whatever color you're making. All right, so we want a nice clean lid. We're not really worried about over here. That's pretty difficult to clean because even when you run water on it, it's watercolors, so then the colors run. So don't worry about that so much. You want to worry more about the lid. Okay, you will want to look at any colors and see is my yellow really dirty or anything like that. We don't usually use white. I'm an anti-white watercolor teacher, so we don't really even use it in my class, so I actually don't care if that one's dirty a little bit. But if any colors happen to have a little bit of another color on top, the best thing to do is just wet that brush and then just wipe it a little bit with some clean water and then wipe off your brush on your paper towel. So I'm just kind of wiping back and forth like this, going again, and then wiping back and forth. Sometimes you might need a little bit more water, but that's how you're going to go ahead and clean your color properly. Okay, just a reminder when we use a watercolor brush, so I have one that's actually fillable, but I also have my cup of water over here as well. You want to make sure that your brush stays really nice. So when you're storing your brushes, you always store it with the tip up. When you're working, you can keep it tipped down into the water. But most times you want to make sure that the brush tip stays up so it doesn't get all bent from being on the bottom of the cup. You never want to pull on the bristles of the brush. That's a big no-no because you will actually destroy the brush and pull it out. You always want to gently wipe kind of back and forth like this to clean off or dry off your brush. Never pull on it, okay? And definitely never smash it and rub this way. The ends of the brush, so what's closest to the actual handle, you never want to get your paper or anything that close there. You always want to use just the tip of the brush, okay? We are always gentle with our paintbrushes, but we are especially gentle with our watercolor paintbrushes. All right, I have my sketchbook set up next to me because we're going to use that to test colors. And I have my project here. I'm going to take that masking tape that I was talking about. Now, masking tape and any sort of tape likes to destroy paper, right? Sometimes it rips off. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just a small piece because we're just going to tape down our corners. And I'm going to actually use my shirt and I'm going to do this a few times. Okay, and what it's going to do is it's going to get fuzzies onto that tape so that when I go to tape down my painting, it's not going to stick as much to the actual paper because there's going to be that kind of layer of fibers from my sweatshirt. So again, dab, 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 dab a few times. And then we're going to do every single corner. So you can't see it, but I'm going to do the bottom corner. So all four corners, tape them down on whatever work surface you're working on. I highly suggest if you're watercoloring, maybe move to the kitchen table, or if you have a nice desk in your room, but you definitely don't want to try to do this on the floor or on a bed or anything like that where you might make a mess and your parents might be upset. Okay, all right, so we are all set up. Why did I just tape that down? Well, when your paper gets wet from watercolor, it starts to curl. That's just the natural behavior of paper. So we want to make sure that we tape down our edges so that we are restricting that paper from curling up and maybe causing, paint to get where you don't want it to get. This should help keep a nice smooth surface as much as possible while we work. All right? So we're making skin color today. And there is no perfect formula for making skin color. I'm going to give you some suggestions, but that's why we have our sketchbook today, is because we want to test our color before we put it on here. Never, ever, ever, when you're mixing a brand new color, test it first onto your paper. There is really not a great way to erase watercolor, especially if it's super pigmented. Lighter watercolor we can sometimes wash out with a little bit more clean water, but typically we will still see that mark. All right, so I'm actually going to place my sketchbook over the top just to kind of keep my project safe and to show you while I am mixing. This is some of my practice drawing from the smile and the nose. And this is good because we will talk about lips a little bit too, because they're going to take a little bit. They are part of your skin, but they have a little bit of different pigment, right, than the rest of your skin color. So our standard formula for our skin color to start is going to be our yellow-orange, which is up here. And then I like to use the red-orange, but you could just use the straight red. That's going to make it a little warmer. And then we also add in a little bit of brown. Now, depending on your nationality and your skin pigment, will depend on maybe how much brown you add or maybe how much of that red-orange you add. So it's going to always look, watercolor always looks much brighter. So I'm just squeezing out water into my main section of my palette over here. And I'm actually going to scoot this over so you guys can see a little better. All right, I want a pretty big puddle. We don't want to run out while we're doing this at all, because there's no way you're going to be able to make the exact same color again. Okay, so I have a pretty big puddle over here collected with water. Then I'm going to go ahead and start moistening my paints. Okay, so making just a little bit of a puddle on top. And now I'm going to start transferring 2 or 3 loads of the paints into my puddle. And it's going to look pretty bright. Okay, now what I don't want to see you do is try to scoop the paint. We're not actually trying to get the actual like hard pigment out of the watercolor tray. You are just getting that color that's floated to the top after you got that color wet. All right, so we are not pumpkin orange, so we need to soften this up. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to get the other 2 colors that I want moistened up, wet on top. I don't really like the word moist, but that's all right. All right, I'm going to grab a little bit of this red orange. I'm going to drop it in. Not a ton, maybe 1 or 2 loads, just so it turns a little bit more on the red end, but it's still very orange. Okay, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab the brown. I'm going to grab a little bit of that. And I'm just going to do 1 layer of brown. I do not have very dark skin. Now, if you look at me and then you look at that brown that's on the screen, they don't match, right? But they might. The trick is the color that's on your palette is always going to look more dense and opaque than it will on paper. So that's why we have to come and test. So I'm going to pick up that color that I just made, and I'm going to gently place it on my paper. I'm going to turn off my light a little bit. It's a little bright so you guys can't see. There we go. And on my page, you can see how much thinner it is, how much warmer it is. I would say it's a little bit on the brown side for me, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the red orange, and just a tiny little bit. And then I'm going to try to add that over here. And the best thing to do if you're just not sure is to let it dry a little ways. Now your sketchbook paper is way different than watercolor paper. Don't worry about any of like the marks that it leaves, just look for the color. And then make adjustments from there. So, you know, if I still feel like this is a little too warm, I could go back in and add in either some straight yellow, or I could come over to the yellow orange. If somehow you didn't maybe make your puddle big enough and it's really opaque and dark, just go into your cup and add a little bit more water. I would rather have your skin be a little bit more translucent than opaque. We don't want you to end up chalky or anything like that. Now, as I'm testing on my paper, I'm also sort of warming up my hands for watercolor. Notice that I'm holding my brush kind of far up the handle. And I'm being very gentle, and I'm only kind of tickling the edge of the paper. We never smash. We don't want to rub over and over in one spot. We want to make it nice and consistent the whole time. So I feel pretty good about my skin color. Before I add it to my project, I do want to talk about our lips. What you're going to do for your lips is you are going to paint them whatever skin color you agree with. And don't forget your ears are skin color, your underneath your eyebrows are skin color. So you're actually going to want to do all of that and then layer on top of it with whatever colors you need for your eyebrows to match your hair, etc. Okay, so I'm going to paint my lips skin color, right? Then I'm actually going to take a little bit of the paint that's already in this section, and I'm just going to move a little bit over. Just a little bit will work. And I'm going to add just a little bit more of that red value, and I might have just added too much. So I'm going to make it extra watery. We basically just want to take that skin pigment and make it one shade towards red a little bit more. But we're not wearing lipstick, right? So when I say red, I mean we're using red paint, but when we add just a little bit, it's just changing the hue to be a little bit warmer, a little bit more of that red tone. So then when I go back over my lips, it's a subtle change, enough to make the lips look a little bit different from the other skin color that I've been practicing with, but it's enough that it's going to stand out and look correct. And this is for boys and girls, no right or wrong. All right, so go ahead and pause and practice, and then when you are ready, unpause. I'm going to go ahead and start applying to my actual project, okay? So I'm going to slide this over just a little bit. Okay. All right, so I'm still working with my skin color. I'm going to put that in first, and I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to go along the edge of my Sharpie first and use this sort of like a barrier, and I am going to go through my eyebrows because we don't have super dense eyebrows. Our hair and our skin shows through our hair. I'm being gentle with my paintbrush. And you don't have to use the paintbrush that came in your paint kit. If you have better paintbrushes at home and you would like to use those, please feel free. I'm going over my eyelids, but I'm being really careful not to go into my actual eye. So your eyelids are made of skin, but inside your eye, we have beautiful colors and whites of our eyes. So I'm being very careful. I'm kind of tracing around with my paintbrush and then sort of filling in, and I'm being very gentle, and I'm working pretty quickly because you want, notice that I keep going back for more paint. You want it to be nice and wet. You want to be able to push the paint around a little bit. That's what makes watercolors different from painting with, say, tempera paint or acrylic paint. So I have to be careful in my mouth. I chose to show teeth. I don't want brown teeth. So I'm going over my lips, but making sure that my teeth stay exposed. If you get any like puddly areas, just kind of use your paintbrush and kind of sweep it down towards the areas that you haven't painted yet. So all the way through my chin. All right, and now I need to do my ear as well. Because again, skin. I'm going to avoid my earrings. So if you have earrings, try to be very careful. I'm using just the very tip of my brush and sort of tickling my paper. Okay. And then I need to do my neck. And then I need to scan and look. Now I have some puddling going down by my chin, and I have really nowhere to push the paint. I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to kind of dry it off a little bit, and then I'm going to use my brush sort of like a sponge, and it's going to pick up some of that watercolor that's pooling where I don't want it to pool. So again, you're not dabbing your paper towel to your paper. You're drying off your paintbrush and then using your paintbrush like a sponge, and it will soak it up, and then you can dry it off onto the paper towel. All right, it looks like I don't have hands in this one, so I need to do my ankles. That's the only thing that's left. I know it's not showing right now. Let's see, I'll tip a little bit so you guys can see. And then I gotta do my little quick draw Birkenstock toes. And then I gotta let that dry. All right, I'm gonna check over everything. Did I get everything with skin color? I feel good about that. So that's it. That's it for today. The reason why we're not doing anything else is we need this to dry, okay? If you were even to do the lips today, that reddish color could accidentally bleed into the rest of your face. So we are going to wait on that. And the cool part is if you leave your palette open and you let it dry out like this, watercolors reactivate. So I don't need to mix this color again or this color again. All I need to do is drop a little bit more water in here tomorrow to kind of liven it back up. And you're basically reactivating the paint with a little bit of water. It's the same concept of how, you know, the paints work straight out of the box. So let this sit, let it dry. Don't undo the tape, don't undo anything. Don't try to move on and paint the background or your hair. Just wait. Watercolor is about patience, and hopefully that didn't take you too long today, and you can go on with the rest of your day. Have a good one, guys.